For making it out on a rainy Wednesday. I know the rain shuts down half the city, so I appreciate y'all being here. I'm William Glass. I'm the director of Birmingham AI and really excited. Who was at the last nonprofit breakout? I see some familiar faces. Okay, awesome, welcome. Whose first time is it to a Birmingham AI event? First time? Okay, welcome first timers, welcome. Really excited to have you all here. Today's conversation is about how do you use AI to plan and execute your end-of-year donor campaigns. Now, this is going to be applicable even outside of that context, but that's the focus that we've got. And Andrew Mitchell, who's one of our leaders for this breakout group, is going to kind of talk a little bit about content before we get into the main event with Ashley over here from Holy Family Christore. So really excited to dive into that. I'm going to give some updates on what's been happening in the AI space that might be interesting for you to just know before we dive into the content. Again, I'm William Glass. If you haven't been to a Birmingham AI or you're not super familiar with Birmingham AI, we are a 501c3. We are a nonprofit as well. So selfishly, I am excited about being here so that I can learn from all of you and all of our great speakers. This is from our general meetup. So we started in 2023. ChatGPT had just come out, and a couple of founders, Austin, who's back there in the black t-shirt, and Will Blackburn, we're just like, we're using this ChatGPT thing at work now. It's kind of cool. I wonder if anybody else is. And 50 people showed up to that first event, and we've grown ever since. And so now we have about 200 people that show up to our general meetup that is just focused on something general topics. And then we have these breakouts where we get more specific into AI use cases within an industry. So we also have, I'll talk a little bit more about what those look like. So definitely feel free to come to these as well. They're not just for tech people. We do keep them really approachable so that regardless of where you are in your AI journey, you can learn and grow and have a good time and meet other people that are excited about AI. This is our mission as an organization, as a nonprofit. Our focus is on accelerating AI adoption here in Birmingham for all. And ultimately what we envision is that by the time we get to 2030, we want to see a thriving Birmingham. We want to see some of our toughest challenges being solved and using this new technology to help us grow and build stronger, better communities. And this nonprofit group is tackling some of the toughest challenges here. Just quickly, what are some of the missions or focus areas that your nonprofit works on? Just feel free to shout them out. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Awesome. Autism. Love it. Workforce development. Social justice. Adoption and foster care. Education, human efficiency optimization. You might have to unpack that one for us, as they say in the corporate world. Say that again? Music. Yeah, arts, creative, love that. So obviously we've got a room of diverse missions and visions, and if we can, through this group, our vision is that we unite our nonprofit leaders so that we can have the biggest impact possible. And that's ultimately why we get this group together. And the mission, again, is to collaborate among us. So while we're up here presenting different information, use cases, things that you can go take and apply afterwards, we want you all to talk, communicate, because there's something from music and diversity, equity, and inclusion and education that we can all bring together and learn of the different ways we're using AI. So that's why we get this group together on a monthly basis to have these conversations. So thank you for being a part of it. And if you didn't fill out that survey at the front end, let me know. That's how we're getting feedback on what we should be talking about here. What do you guys want to see? Make sure that we present that. Cool. So let's jump into some AI updates. I've got 3 that I'm going to share that I think are worth paying attention to. AI browsers. Who's using AI browsers? Couple hands. Who has no clue what an AI browser is? Okay, another couple hands. All right, cool. If you were at our general meetup, this was actually the topic. But what's interesting is that OpenAI just launched their AI browser, Atlas, about a week ago, I guess now? A week ago? Gosh, time moves so quick. So a week ago. And this is exciting for a couple different reasons. The browser wars are heating up, and this is where we're starting to move in terms of being able to access AI. Rather than having to go to a dedicated app or a dedicated URL like ChatGPT or Claude, it's just going to be embedded in the experience. And that's where we're headed. So these are the three big competitors right now: Dia, Comet, and Atlas. Has anybody used Dia? Dia, a couple Dia hands. Comet, if you are not using a Mac, the only one available to you right now is Comet. So I'll just call that out. If you are a Windows person, Comet is your AI browser of choice. And then ChatGPT, Atlas. So rather than just talking about these, I figured let's test them out. So I wanted to show you some examples of a very simple use case of how I used these AI browsers to help me build this slide. So the prompt was, can it help me generate an image and just insert it directly into the presentation for me without me having to do anything? And so I did a very basic, simple prompt, not the best prompting job, so ignore that. But I asked, can you generate an image for me of a new release sign that says October AI updates? And you can see I left the updates not capitalized and an exclamation point, just so you can kind of see some of the nuances of what it actually did. And then once it's created, place it on slide 9. So that was the task. So I first used Atlas, and it got the image correct. It generated this image for me on the sidebar, which was really cool. And then when it went to go insert it, I received this message. I can't directly insert it into Google Slides. So yeah, it got halfway there. It got halfway there of actually doing the task. Dia, when I tested this with Dia, gave me this long description of how it can help me design the concept, but it couldn't do that. It didn't actually generate the image, and it was definitely not able to insert the image, but it gave me some instructions on how I could go to Canva and use Canva to generate an image for me. So critical failure is what I would say for Dia on this use case. And then Comet performed the best. So it generated this image. I'll say it's not the best image that I've seen. Like, I probably could have spiced this up. It's not that sexy, but it did it. It gave me the image. And as you can see, so the way these AI browsers work is that there's an assistant that pops up on the side, and it has access to the browser that you're on, and it can go open other tabs, and you can give it other skills and access to other websites that you use. And so Comet actually took over my browser, and that's why there's this blue outline around. I wasn't clicking, it just was going and doing things for me, and I could watch it as it navigated the browser for me. And so as you can see, it like went in, it clicked image, it went to go upload an image into the presentation. You see it, and then it had, this pops up just like you would normally do if I was doing it manually. And it dropped in the URL, and it put this slide together for me. Right? Wow. Again, I don't think I could use this, right? It's just the image right in the center, not stylized, no other words, but I didn't tell it to do that. So it followed my directions exactly. So these browsers are cool. There's all these different uses that are coming up, ways you can use it. You can use it to go navigate flights. If you've got a document pulled up, you can ask questions through the AI browser about the document or the website you've got pulled up. So I won't show you the videos on it, but there's some really good videos out there for each of these that kind of showcase how they work. But I would say Comet gets success. It did exactly what I asked it to do. So I would categorize AI browsers right now like ChatGPT in 2024. Like, it's good, not great. Like, it does some things. It solves some problems for me. It can't do everything that I'd like it to do. But where we're headed in the next 3 months, I think these are going to be the future of how we're actually interacting with AI. So I encourage you to go ahead and get comfortable with them, start using them in certain capacities, and download them. So Comet is available to everybody. Dia, we have access codes if you want to play with Dia. And then ChatGPT Atlas, I believe, is open to everybody. But it's just Mac. So Dia and ChatGPT or Atlas are just for Mac users. If you have Windows, Comet is going to be your browser of choice. So, very cool. The next update that I wanted to take a look at, and this was something we had to cut from last month, but let's talk about the environmental impact of AI. Have you guys seen all the headlines out there? Data centers, these are some of them, energy demands. It can help the environment potentially. Alabama, we've got data centers that are being proposed. There's all these headlines, but what's the data actually saying about AI's impact on the environment? Well, first off, OpenAI is planning to add enough energy demand to surpass what India does already by the year 2033. So just to power what OpenAI does, one company, where India's energy usage is, they project that they're going to be using that by 2033. So we're talking about a lot of energy. Now, the majority of the energy that's being used is the training side. So that's the number one driver for energy usage is training. So whether you're weighing how you should be using AI, whether you should be using it, what's the environmental impact of your usage of it, the majority of the energy demand is on the training, which means whether you use it or not, that energy is going to be used. The second is the actual usage of it. So let's look at what's the actual usage of these products. So if you just do a regular ChatGPT prompt or Gemini prompt, you can see that you're using 0.00024 kilowatt hours of energy and 0.26 milliliters of water. What does that mean? It means that it's the same amount of energy that it took to do a Google search in 2008. This is what Google looked like in 2008. And 6 drops of water. So if you're concerned about your personal usage of these tools and whether you're having a negative impact on the environment and you have like a conscious, should I be using them, should I not be using them, this is what the data is saying. Now, when you get into image generation and video generation, those do require more energy, and I don't have the data for you on that. But this is if you're just using the tools like we're going to use today, and we're going to see from Ashley's presentation. So that's my take on it. And then the other thing that I think is really a really cool project that's out there is something called CivLab. And they're studying government and putting all of this public data out about how government works and how to make it work more efficiently, and how can you learn about how do you get more involved. And I want to just show you this really quickly. And the reason is, I think that when we think about displaying our impact, this is a really cool project of how they're displaying impact. And it's something that as nonprofits, we should think about how do we show the value of what we do beyond, reports and data, but can we create really cool interactive experiences? And so as you can see, this is the San Francisco, this is the first case study of it. On the left, there's just some data, but you can see at the center is the people of San Francisco, right? That's the heart of the city. And if you click on these different areas, I'll click on the mayor, it shows you who the mayor connects to visually. Let me see if I can zoom in. Can you guys see this? It's not going to get bigger. But you can look and see. So you can see the mayor's connected to the workforce investment. And when I click on workforce investment board, it tells me who runs the workforce investment board. And as you click down, it also shows you who's appointed, who's elected, and you can sort of start to see how government works. So it's pretty cool. And then there's also budget graphs. Where's our money going? Where's it being spent? And you can click into each one of these and understand the data about where the city is. So to me, this is really powerful when you think about how do we solve the problems in the city and all of the different areas that we're working on. If we have this type of data, what could we do and how can we better serve our mission? So that's the last update that I have for you all. This is next month's breakout. Because of the holidays, we're doing it in December. So Tuesday, December 2nd. If you'd like to register, you can go ahead and scan the QR code to register for that one. And it will be a Tuesday instead of a Wednesday, just so that you're aware. And so I'm going to go ahead and invite up Andrew Mitchell now, who's going to dive into the content side and hand it over to him.
That's great. Thank you so much, William.
Thank you.
Hey, everybody. We also William may wanted to cover this too. There's some other breakouts. This is the nonprofit breakout. We have others that we were adding in the Birmingham AI space. Let me jump back there. Just for your awareness, our general meetup is happening November 12th. And then if you want to hear what they're talking about in the finance world or the marketing world, there's some of those breakouts. And then our first ever launch of the HR people breakout is happening in November as well. So a lot of more sessions like these where we can talk about specific issues and specific uses and all these kinds of things within these areas, which is super, super exciting. Just very quickly, as a So my name is Andrew. I'm a part of the planning team for this breakout for nonprofits. I started my career in the education nonprofit space with Teach for America, an A+ education partnership in the Birmingham Education Foundation. And now I help companies think through ways to use AI when I'm not planning events like this on ways that we can use AI. It's weird how that intersects. And so we're talking today about year-end campaigns and putting together year-end campaigns. How do you do that? And Ashley's going to come up in a few minutes and kind of show some specific tools. And I think before we get into some of the tools, sometimes it's interesting to have like a broader conversation first. When we talk about AI, I think one of the big questions that people have about it, or one of the big maybe barriers people have about AI, is when it comes to writing and like content generation. And so if you're putting together a year-end campaign, obviously there's a lot of content that goes into that. There's mail-outs, there's social media posts. And I think it begs this question, like, what does writing look like with AI? And so I think to tell this story, I recently came across a job description that had this as one of the descriptors for the ideal candidate. It said, you know when something needs to be great, and you know when something needs to be good enough to keep momentum going. And this really stood out to me as an interesting filter. And I think in the world of AI and with the use of AI, this filter plays out in a couple of different ways. When we use this filter well, and we give the right amount of thinking and the right amount of context to something, we can get some fantastic output. When we apply this filter poorly, we get work slop, which is my current favorite term when we talk about AI. And you probably have seen this, right? You've asked for something from a coworker or colleague, or I'm sure no one in here has been guilty of this ourselves. But you get something that clearly was like whatever the first response was from ChatGPT was copied and pasted and put in the email and sent to me. And I can tell, and we can all kind of tell, right, when that comes. This is an interesting phenomenon happening right now because there's this big push, right? Like everyone's using AI, everyone has access to AI, everyone's starting it. And it's, if you've played around with these tools, you know you can generate a lot of content really, really quickly. Things that would take me hours to do, I can have in mere minutes, which is fantastic. One of the big, kind of drivers of why we're using these tools is for additional efficiency and time back in your day. But this work slop is, it's not great, and it's having some far-reaching implications. A study that was published in HBR, Harvard Business Review recently, showed the perceptions that coworkers have of their coworkers after receiving some of this work slop can really impact the way that they're perceiving each other. The kind of purple bar on the bottom here shows that I perceive someone as less, whatever that column is, after receiving some of this work slop. So if I got an email that was clearly just ChatGPT generated, or I have a client who started using Copilot to draft all their emails, and everyone knows they're using Copilot to draft all their emails, and everyone's kind of making fun of him for using Copilot to draft all his emails. Maybe you're perceived as less creative or less capable, because you're using these tools, this work slop. And so as we think about content generation, especially for something as important as a year-end campaign, where you are putting your brand in front of your donors, you're trying to build your brand, you're trying to build a donor base, I think this really imposes an important question of some things we need to be asking ourselves as we're using these tools. I think one of the reasons for this is this idea of like how valuable some of these AI tools are right now. What I think is perhaps the most important benchmark out there, and if you're not familiar with the AI world, every time a new model comes out from one of the labs, they use these different benchmarks to kind of see how good it is. Can it do graduate level science, and can it, pass the Math Olympiad and all those kinds of things. And those are all great and fine, but like most of us aren't doing those kinds of things in our everyday work. There's a new benchmark from OpenAI that they published with their last GPT-5 update called GDP-Val. And this is measuring how valuable how well can this tool do what is redeemed as economically valuable tasks, which is a fancy way of saying the work that most of us do every day as quote unquote knowledge workers, sending emails, writing reports, analyzing data, doing all that kind of day-to-day business, nonprofit operations work. How well do these tools do this? The way that this benchmark works is there's a panel of experts that are assembled, and they look at AI output and human output on the same thing, and they're just asked which one's better. And if the AI is chosen, it gets a check, and the percentage, the numbers on the side is just choosing how frequently was the AI output chosen as the better option. So 50% is kind of this idea of parity. The AI output is being chosen as frequently as the human output as the better example. And even the best models right now, you can see we're not quite at that level of parity, right? We can still kind of tell when an expert is looking at something that, like, the AI tool was used in this. This wasn't pure human output. Especially when it comes to writing, I think a lot of us see this, right? There's this a very large group online that are kind of very forcefully pushing back against using AI tools when it comes to writing, right? And again, this idea of like creating this work slot. To the point where I think most of us have an innate ability to kind of detect AI-generated content. So I'm going to give you a second to read these two samples on the screen, and I'll ask you to do a quick show of hands vote in just a second. But the question is which of these was AI generated? I'll give you another few seconds to take a look at them, see your M dashes. All right, show of hands, A. All right, everybody in the room. What gave it away? The dash, right? The dreaded M dash down there. Anything else give it away? Wordiness, thrilled, yeah, change makers, right? All this like elevated language, right? Create community impact. Exactly, right? Yeah, the parallelism, right? This wasn't a LinkedIn post, so it didn't say the big unlock for me was, But so we can kind of like see this, right? There's a few other things that are happening here, and for all the social science nerds in the room like me, bear with me for just a second here. So think about the way all these models are trained, right? ChatGPT, let's just stick with that for an example. All the information on the internet, right, fed into it, it's looking at all of it aggregated. And so if you're looking at aggregated average information and using that to develop content, you're going to regress towards the mean. You're going to have more of an average output, kind of this bland output. You're not at the level or the tips of the distribution of like the most dynamic kind of language. We also have this thing that happens when we get a first draft. If you go to AI and listen, in my workshops, I tell people, like, if you are staring at the blank page and you have no idea where to start, these are fantastic for giving you that first draft. But there's something that happens with that first draft too, which is once you're in a direction, it's hard to change that direction, right? We kind of tweak from where we are, right? So we kind of anchor to that first draft. And then my other kind of favorite thing in the AI world right now, everyone know what the Dunning-Kruger effect is, right? So it's this like, think of it as like this little hill and then this big dip and the pick back up kind of graph, where it's like, I don't know anything. I learned a little bit, which means I think I know everything. And then I learn a little bit more, and it's like the, oh God, I know nothing, right? ChatGPT and these AI tools make us a little confident in our abilities. If you look at my ChatGPT, I am a tax wizard. I'm a legal wizard, right? I just know all of these things at an expert level. And I don't know any different when I look at it, right? To be able to review that. And so at times we get this output that, because we don't have that expertise, we are not entirely sure how to like tweak it. So a few things to think about when you are generating your content, when you're coming up with your year-end campaigns, when you're using AI to write. The first thing is get really clear on what you're wanting before going to the AI tool. Even just that little step of kind of thinking through, like, what does the output need to look like? What's our message? What's our thesis, right? That can really help so that you're not just going with whatever the tool gives you. Knowing what your voice sounds like is really important as well. Ashley's going to show us a really specific example how you can do that. But as organizations, right, you have certain words you use, you have certain language you use. And one of the ways to kind of keep that box A from being checked by all of the recipients of your emails is making sure that you're sticking to that brand voice, having clarity on kind of the verbiage. And then as well as like thinking through who are those experts either internally or other organizations that you can pull in to kind of keep, be a second set of eyes as you're generating all this content. So there becomes this decision point as you are generating content, as you are writing, as you are creating things of like, what if this needs to be the AI and what if this needs to be me? And that can look a little bit different for everybody, but maybe I need to do my best thinking on the front end, putting the outline together, making sure the content calendar is right? And then I can let the AI kind of take my thoughts and run with it so I have that initial piece. And it's really this idea of like using the AI tools to complement my expertise and complement my thinking versus replacing it. There are some other tools that you can help with this process as well. So we've said ChatGPT a lot today. For those of you who this is your first time here, if we say ChatGPT, this also applies to Claude, Copilot, Gemini, right? All of these different other tools. We all have kind of the first mover market bias because it's the one most of us started using. But within these tools, there's some things that you can do to improve your writing. So better prompting, the questions that I'm asking the tool and the kind of the responses that I'm getting. That's one way I can tweak this. And then the idea of kind of moving into custom instructions, or repeatable instructions. Again, I don't want to steal any of Ashley's thunder as she gets into that. If you are doing a lot of writing, then there are some specific tools that you could at least consider using and maybe doing a free trial of one of them. Grammarly has been around for a long time. Most of us had that as like a plugin in our Gmail to tell you like, this is on a 10th grade level. It should be lower than that. They have incorporated a ton of AI functionality recently where you can upload your entire brand kit, style guide, all of that. It'll review that. It'll generate content. It'll review your content. It'll say, hey, this is AI generated content because I generated it, I know. Right, all those kind of things. And then Jasper is another one, very big in the marketing world and content marketing, but it's again, for like generating content, using a brand kit, having an AI tool built for a specific purpose is one to check out. And then, maybe you're someone who like, I want to do the initial thinking and that's like, want to let the rest of the process run. I'll design the process and think through it, right? But I don't need to necessarily be, like, once I've done my best thinking, I don't want to do any of the other steps. And there's some great automation tools like N8N, which again, I don't want to steal any of Ashley's thunder on that. So, generating content, writing, knowing those little things to be on the lookout for on the front end can make a really big difference and prevent us from kind of perpetuating this idea of work slop. Which brings me back to this. I don't want to say that I intentionally tricked all of you earlier, but B is also AI generated. It's just that I used a different prompt, and I used a better prompt, and I said use natural language, and I said don't use an M dash, right, and all those kinds of little things. So with a little bit of tweak, these tools can be still really, really valuable. It's just that instead of taking the kind of out of the box first approach, can help save us from a little bit of that work slop. So I want to hand it over to Ashley. She's going to come up and show some specific uses. If I can borrow a phrase from our founder, Austin, from earlier in the week, think of this as like a toolbox chat. Ashley's going to show you some tools. It doesn't necessarily mean that everyone needs all of these tools for everything. But we want you to have the tool in your toolbox in case there is a use for that. So please join me in welcoming Ashley to the stage.
Make sure this is on. Thank you so much, Andrew. I'm really excited to be here. I'm going to switch over to my slide deck real quick. I am certainly no expert at any of this. I started off as a Latin teacher, so and I've ended up into this Director of Communications role at Holy Family Cristo Rey. I would love to spend 10 minutes telling you about our amazing school and some of my amazing students who are over here, but we don't have time for that. So come find me afterwards and I will gush. But hi, I'm Ashley Van, Director of Communications, and I'm really excited to talk about how we've been able to use AI and automation to really turn some scattered last-minute communications that were happening, this department was doing some, and then this department was doing some others, and we weren't really sounding like a piece of brand. And we've been able to really turn those into like consistent, repeatable systems without sacrificing our brand identity, without sacrificing our mission or our values. And so today, the main tools I'm going to be talking about are ChatGPT and N8N. Like Andrew alluded to, those are not the only tools you could use to do any of this. They're just what work for me. And specifically, I'm going to be talking about creating a custom GPT, which is a custom instance of ChatGPT that has those custom instructions for you. But that is available in other programs too. So for Gemini, it would be called a gem. So each LLM has their own terminology. But if you catch me just referring to ChatGPT, know that it's not exclusive to ChatGPT. And then I use a lot of Google products. So we do some Google app scripting as well. But I wanted to start by just sort of talking about my philosophy and my approach to using AI in nonprofit communications. I really understand the skepticism when it comes to using an LLM for communications for writing, particularly in the nonprofit setting where we don't want to lose that human element. We want to make sure that we are retaining our humanity and retaining the dignity of the people that we are serving when we write to them. However, we also know that everyone in a nonprofit has too much to do and not enough time and not enough help to do it. Okay? I know I certainly have that issue. And so AI and automation have really helped me gain back some time so I can spend my time doing the more important things, the more mission critical things, instead of focusing on a newsletter that is just a bunch of announcements that goes out every single week. Okay? So my philosophy is quality in equals quality out. You cannot expect an LLM to produce good output without good input. So if you are not putting in the work on the front end, you are not going to get good work. That's the output. Short prompts without context. So write me a donor thank you letter are going to lead to that work slop that Andrew was talking about. So you really need to do the work. You do need to do the writing. I'm in communication, so I'm still going to be communicating. I'm still going to be writing. I'm really big on context and corrections. An LLM does not have your institutional knowledge. It doesn't know your audiences. It doesn't know your stakeholders. So you have to feed it that information. If the LLM is going to be your thought partner, you need it to be on the same page as you. So you need to have it understanding what you understand. I don't let ChatGPT or an LLM get away with getting something a little bit wrong. If it misunderstands who our brand is, what our mission is, what our identity is, I call it out, I correct it. And I make sure that it has that feedback and so that it can improve its knowledge base and we can have better future interactions. So that might be just a terminology that we use. That could be word choice. Moving on. Give it structure. I set really clear guidelines, rules, constraints, and expectations for what I want the LLM to do. Do's, don'ts, and a very clear outline of what I want to get in return. So that might be a word count. That might be an outline of what the output should look like. So if you have specific headings, if you need it in a certain format, go ahead and tell it that. And then breaking up bigger projects into smaller chunks has been really helpful. I find that trying to do too much at once really drastically reduces the quality. But the main thing is that human review is critical. Nothing I publish, nothing our school publishes should ever come straight from AI. Whether it's just adjusting the punctuation, those darn M dashes, though I will admit I'm an M dash lover. I was tagged in my thesis 10 years ago for using too many M dashes, so I get AI struggle there. Or if it's rewriting a full section, I always review and revise and refine anything before it goes out. So generative AI for me is always an intermediary step. Everything starts and ends in human hands. So I want to focus today on just two topics two tools that make the biggest difference for me. The first is my AI copywriting tool, my copywriter GPT, and then a content production automation process that I've developed, which uses that copywriter GPT for, in my case, some newsletters. So let's get to it. So the brand voice copywriter, it's a tool I'm most proud of. It's the one I think can be the most useful to you. And it's, I think, relatively easy to implement as soon as now for your end of year giving season. So this is a custom instance of an LLM that I've programmed with specific instructions and specific knowledge to help me write, or it's really to rewrite content for each of our different stakeholder groups and each of our different communications channels that's in line with our brand voice standards. So how I did it, you have to start offline. You have to start by knowing your audiences. You have to know who your stakeholders are, and you have to know where you reach them. And if you've never done an audit like that of mapping out who all of your stakeholders are and how you reach them, something I would really strongly encourage you to do. And that's something that AI can't really help you with. That's a you job. But after you get that part mapped out, you can use AI to help you build your brand voice guidelines. And I did this. So for instance, our stakeholder groups at the school very broadly are students and families. We have corporate partners, and then we have donors and supporters. And we talk to each of these groups differently, and we talk to them on different channels. Just with social media, on Facebook, we're mostly reaching parents and donors. But on Instagram and TikTok, we're reaching the students. And then on LinkedIn, we're reaching our corporate partners. So we have to know where our people are so that we can make sure we're targeting, we're refining our language when we write for those different channels. Your organization may already have an existing brand voice guideline document, but I would imagine some of us don't. And I want to show you what ours looks like. I don't have time to go through this in detail as much as I would love to. But I worked with ChatGPT to develop this based on exemplars. So I uploaded a whole bunch of documents that I've written. And I had it help me analyze tone and word choice, stylistic choices, and help me develop guidelines for how I write for each stakeholder group and how I write on different communications channels. So down here at the back, we've got how we write for the website versus Facebook versus LinkedIn, all of this. And I had a very, very long conversation with ChatGPT to help me develop this. So I'll just really quickly scroll through some of this, this prompt. I have a document for you with resources that has a copy of this prompt, has a copy of my sample brand voice guidelines document, some other sample prompts for you to use, and I'll get to a QR code for that in just a sec. But I had a lot of long conversations with ChatGPT. We went back and forth for a while. I like to have ChatGPT ask me questions, and I provide really long answers. So probably over-explain sometimes, but it gets me what I need, which is a very detailed, very specific set of instructions that I can then feed to the LLM to help me write better for my audiences. So let's take a look at what that copywriter tool looks like. So this is a custom instance of ChatGPT. You can build one by coming over here to Explore and hit Create. I've already set mine up. And let's look at the instructions. So I gave it very explicit, again, long instructions on what its purpose is and how it's supposed to behave. It's supposed to ask me questions. It's supposed to clarify. It's never going to assume. I've got things in here about tone and formatting, giving me detail about how I want it to interact with me. And then that brand voice guidelines that I just showed you is uploaded as part of the knowledge base. So anytime I interact with this instance of ChatGPT, it has all of those instructions already programmed in, so I don't have to feed it those instructions every single time. And what I want to show you is 2 ways you could use this. So the first is sort of around that end of year fundraising. We start with a mailer, looks like this. This is last year's at the school. And I think whatever is the centerpiece of your campaign, that needs to be a you thing. We don't want to just give AI free reign to decide what our year-end campaign is going to be about. That needs to come from you and your organization and be part of, your conversations about where your brand and where your organization's mission, values, and future is headed. So what I do is take this once I'm happy with it, and look in this one. I pasted the text from my annual appeal mailer, and what I had it do is help me generate the additional content that I need for this end of year campaign based on what I had already written. And so I had it generate for me 3 Facebook posts, 2 LinkedIn posts, some donor newsletter blurbs, and text for the online giving page. And it came back with me and had a quick conversation with me to check to make sure it understood what I wanted. And I always have it give me these questions to make sure we're on the same page. In this instance, it went ahead and gave me a first draft. And so I looked through this. Now, this was a kind of cheesy campaign, so it is completing the puzzle. So there is a little bit of cheesiness in these in this content, but I think this is a really good place to start. Again, this always ends in human hands, so I'm always reviewing, revising, refining. But it had a problem. I edit it probably 75% of the time. So, but I'm really picky. If, especially for something like an end of year campaign, I want it to be right and I want it to be perfect, and I'm a little bit of a control freak. So I push back a little bit. So in this instance, I wanted these pieces of content to be able to stand alone if someone had not received this particular mailer that went out. If they were just seeing on social media for the first time, I didn't want these references to what the board chair wrote. And then I gave it those answers to the questions it gave me at the beginning, and it shifted what it wrote to give me new content that I would feel comfortable taking as what I review, revise, and refine from. And so this is sort of my process for when I'm needing to generate a lot of content around the same topic. Another way I use this copywriter GPT is to take content that I have and pivot for different stakeholder groups. So, for instance, we have a corporate work study program newsletter that goes out every month to corporate partners and supervisors. And Bear Khan, our director of corporate work study, wrote this very nice student spotlight about Shania. And I want to be able to take that and use it for some donors. And I want to be able to have them, read the story and be inspired and feel like, hey, this is, a good time to renew my gift for the year. And then I also wanted this to be transformed into something that I could use on Facebook and Instagram, not targeting donors at all, not targeting corporate partners at all, but targeting parents and students who might want to learn a little bit more about our school after reading about Shania's experience. And so, again, I pasted in my original text, and we went back with these questions to confirm. And it doesn't have to be really long answers. A lot of these are just quick confirmations, yes, no. And then it rewrites that content in a way that I know is in line with our brand standards, in a way that I know is in line with how we talk to each of our different stakeholder groups. I actually have this in Spanish as well because we do a lot of things bilingually. I have a separate GPT for translation. We don't have time to talk about that, but if you have questions, I would love to talk to you about that offline. I don't. I speak Latin, which is not very helpful. But I can read enough Spanish to get by. So these are two ways I use the Copywriter GPT. I use this every single day, and it's been a real game changer for me. And this is also something that I can share with my colleagues. So I can share a link to this instance with them, and they can use it to help their writing so that it falls in line with our brand voice guidelines. So I'm probably running over time, so I'm going to switch over, unless there are any questions right now, to talking about some automations. Yes. So you can definitely do this in a Word document. You can just upload a Word document. You can upload a PDF. You can upload a whole bunch of different file types. You can upload images, and it will read text off of images. I think at the beginning of this one, you can see I uploaded a whole bunch of different types of documents for it to use as exemplars. So you do not have to paste in. You can absolutely just upload a document and have it work from that. Any other questions?
Are you constantly, are you constantly tweaking this over time with refining?
Absolutely. So yeah, so we are always adjusting our brand voice guidelines and always adjusting the way we talk. I'm going to talk specifically with Spanish because that has been the most recent use case where I had to do some tweaking. So we had built in this glossary of specific terminology that we use for our Spanish-speaking families that uses the localized vocabulary that is most familiar to them, many of whom come from Mexico, but we also have families from all over Latin America. And so I've been working with our ELL interventionists to develop that glossary. And as we get more information about what terminology works best with our families, I edit that glossary and I make sure it's updated in the GPT. And so then it has new instructions and new information to work from, and we'll follow those instructions from that point forward. You could do that for writing in English as well. That's just the most recent example that I have.
Okay, John Wayne here. As he talked about, I'm curious how close to look for feedback from end user or donors and so on. Feedback or information, helping those line,
Yes. So on something like a year-end campaign, I would go back in. What I like about having this instance is that it still saves each conversation as a separate conversation. So I can go back into that same thread where I was working on our end-of-year campaign and say, hey, this is the feedback that I got, and this is what we saw happen as a result of this language, and we want to make sure that in the future we do this way instead. Can you help me adjust my brand voice guidelines? Can you help me adjust my custom instructions for the GPT so that we do this in the future? Copyright that you have right now. If you use on the other platforms that we're shipping, or would it require? So you can take those Brown voice guidelines and your instructions and use them in whatever it is you want. And in fact, I have it in Gemini as well. So I have the same copywriter as a gem over here. And you can absolutely set this up in any of the different LLMs. Yes. And I actually, when we get to N8N, which I guess we're going to get to in just a minute, you can put these instructions as the system prompt for an AI agent in N8N, and it will function the same way as if I was using my direct instance of the copywriter GPT. So I want to go back really quickly. And this was that QR code I mentioned. So this has the prompt suggestions for building your own brand voice guidelines. This has a sample brand voice guidelines document. It's not ours because ours was like 30 pages and it was really detailed and I didn't want to overwhelm you. But it's adapted. It looks a lot like what ours looks like. And then also the parameters that I use to set up our custom GPT. Yes. Yes. So, and I will have this QR code up again at some point. So I will make sure everyone's got their phones down before I move on. Okay. So I am probably running over time, so I'm not going to go into this, but this can all be customized. So your stakeholders are different than my stakeholders. Your communications channels are different than my communications channels. And you can do this for any sort of set of stakeholder groups. So if you want to just focus on donors and do major donors, smaller donors, and like granting organizations, you could have one that's focused only on writing for donors and segment that way. So it's very customizable to your needs. And then I just really strongly encourage you to add lots of exemplars, add lots of examples so that it has good quality input and knows how you write so that I can mimic that better. But automation. I have been on a N8N vendor. Yes. Yes, so there's lots of different automation tools. Again, N8N is the one that I use, and I've been on an automation kick, and I've been automating a lot of different things. I would love, again, to tell you all about them, but I don't have time for that. So I'm going to talk about one specific automation that I use, which is for newsletters, that has been really a game changer for me in the amount of time I'm spending on something. So quickly to go back, this newsletter, it goes out every week via Constant Contact, which I imagine a lot of you use or something similar. It goes out to students, parents, guardians, faculty, and staff. It goes out in both English and Spanish. So it's very important, but it's not what I would call mission critical. It's the information that you need to have for your child's school on a weekly basis or a monthly basis so that you know what's happening. Okay? It's a standardized format. It follows the same pattern and goes at the same time every week to the same people. And it is not really doing storytelling. This is very much informational. It's pulling dates from calendars. It's sharing announcements that other people have sent to me. But this was the bane of my existence. This was taking 8 hours a week sometimes to get put together, between tracking down all of the announcements from people, whether they put on a sticky note on my desk or they hollered it down the hallway to me or they put it in a chat. I hated this newsletter. And thanks to automation, one that I don't have time to talk about that's helping organize all of those announcements, but then the one I'm going to show you, I've gotten this down to 1 hour a week. So I've saved 7 hours a week by automating this newsletter. The reason it works is because it has limited sources of information. So all it needs to pull from is Google Calendar and a master spreadsheet that I have in Google Sheets. And all of that information is funneled there, again, automatically through a separate automation. And I don't have to do a lot of touching of it. It just does it itself. I was also already using AI for translating this. So like I said, we do things in English and Spanish. And I was spending a lot of time running my newsletter through my translation GPT. And I just cut out the middleman. I cut out myself and automated the full process. So let me show you the automation. And I thought I had an example of the newsletter. Hold on, I can pull up. So this is what the newsletter looks like. Looks the same every single week. It's a list of dates and events happening on different dates, and then it's just these announcements that other people have sent to me. I sometimes fancy it up with little graphics, but it's really very pretty simple, all in all. And so what I have done is I've created this automation so that I have emailed to me every Friday a production pack with everything that I need to put into that newsletter ready to copy and paste into Constant Contact. You could absolutely, totally automate this process. You can connect to Constant Contact with something like an API call and have it build the newsletter for you. We have a couple of quirks in our newsletter that mean that I need to have access to it in the editor. Some cross-linking between the English and Spanish version. So I have to have editor access, which is why I go the copy and paste route. But all I have to do on Fridays is copy and paste in both English and Spanish. And it has already formatted everything in the way I need it for the newsletter and for these for the date section and then for the announcements. So the way it works is it runs on a schedule. So I think Thursdays, not Fridays. And it computes the dates for next week's newsletter, which dates are we talking about, and pulls everything from Google Calendar. I then have a little bit of custom code here that helps me take the raw data from Google Calendar and rewrite it so that it's nice and pretty and easy to read for humans. It translates here using some custom instructions I use for my translation GPT. And then it pulls my announcements from my Google Sheet. And I can show you that in a second. It builds everything together, translates all of it, and then assembles this little email. And I get it every single week. And this is what the spreadsheet looks like. It's complicated, more complicated than it needs to be because it's got attached to a different automation. I would love to talk to you about it another time if you are interested. But everything it needs is already here. And all I do is copy and paste. And because of the nature of this particular newsletter, it doesn't need a lot of hand-holding. It doesn't need a lot of rewriting. It's just the announcements that you get from your kids' school every week. So
we got time for one question.
Yes.
Anybody have a really great question about Okay.
Okay.
What's in the magic box or the code?
Okay, yeah, absolutely. So I don't code. I had ChatGPT write this for me. So let me show you how I did that real quick. No, that's not where I needed to go.
So you asked it a question of like, hey, ChatGPT, I need you to
Yeah,
format these dates
so
for me from Google Calendar.
I gave it a prompt saying, hey, this is what I want to achieve. This is actually in this. So yeah, I have this prompt for building an automation in whatever tool of your choice. I've got a beginner version, and then in that document with a QR code, there's also a more advanced version of this. And I said, hey, this is what I want to happen. This is the trigger that I want to kick off this automation. This is where I want the data to be pulled from. This is what I want you to give me. It gives me the steps, and in the longer version of this, I have in there, help me generate the custom code to build these nodes in N8N. Since it is sort of dependent on which automation software you would use to build this, like Zapier would be different than N8N, and if this then that would be a little bit different. So I can't give you just like a one-size-fits-all code, but I didn't do any of the coding. ChatGPT did it all for me.
Perfect.
So
awesome. Can we give? I know we're up on time, so can
yes.
we give Ashley a round of applause?
There's that QR code again. Sorry for running over.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Thank you. We just have one quick ask. Is this the presentation? Yeah. One quick ask. So thank you all. Thank you all for. Yeah. Thank you all for being here. So if you wouldn't mind scanning this QR code, we're trying to get better each week. It's 2 questions. One of them is pick a number, and the other one is you don't have to fill out if you really don't want to. But this is how we're gauging what else do you want? How can we make this better? What did you like? And we really need that feedback so that we can make this as valuable as possible. So if you don't mind scanning that, giving us a quick feedback, we really appreciate it. I also want to thank our volunteers. Sean for taking pictures. Thank you so much, Sean. I think Ashley, Tanya, Natasha, and Charles, thank you guys. You probably met them walking in. They checked you in. So can we get a big round of applause for them as well? We heard people liked the food. It was from Slice. So they sponsored our engineering breakout. So Slice is who had the food. But yes, thank you guys for being here, and we really appreciate it. I'll let you guys get on with your day, and don't forget to, we'll see you December 2nd for the next one. So thank you all.